In this video, I'm going to run a Jupyter Notebook with the Dask dashboard on a remote cluster through the ParallelWorks platform's interactive sessions. On my account, I've already started a cluster named Cloud2, and I've already started a Cloud bucket. I can access the credentials to that bucket by clicking on the key icon, but I'm not going to do that here in the video. I can start the Jupyter Lab instance on the remote cluster by going to the Jupyter Lab workflow. I imported this from the ParallelWorks marketplace. The launch form allows me to specify information about the conda environment I'm going to use, as well as the cluster that I want to run on. In this case, it's just Cloud2, but if I had other clusters activated on my account, they would auto-populate in this list. I can choose whether I want it to run on the head node of the cluster or whether I want it to run on a worker node. And in the advanced options, I can install additional packages. For example, I could provide a customized conda environment specification file in YAML format in this field, or I can just load Dask dependencies in a pre-set up and automatically available YAML file just for Dask. When I execute the workflow, it'll take about a minute or so to start, and I'm going to pause the video while conda installs on the remote resource. The workflow is ready when you see this card in the upper right-hand corner of your workspace. You can also access the workflow by clicking the eyeball button in the workflow monitor. This is piping graphics from the remote cluster. This is a Jupyter Lab instance that has just been installed, and I can tell I'm on the remote cluster by opening a terminal. And with the hostname command, the name is prefixed by management, which means that's the head node. I can also get information about the cluster that I'm on. For example, I have 3 compute partitions and 1 node is already up and running. I've already copied a Jupyter Notebook to the cluster, and I can open it here. And in this notebook, I've already included the bucket credentials that I mentioned earlier. You can access this notebook or a copy of it without these credentials inside your ParallelWorks job directory under the Marketplace Jupyter Lab latest and the current running job. Under the Jupyter host directory, there's a copy of this notebook. I can even drag it to my cluster. This is by taking it from here and pulling it into this mounted, the mounted directory from my cluster, and you'll see in just a moment that the file that I dragged on my file browser has now appeared on the cluster as well. When I run the notebook, I'm going to start Dask. I'm going to define a configuration. Note here I can change the compute partition and choose a number of worker nodes that run and start the Dask cluster client. Next, I'm going to start the Dask board. And to see it, I'm going to copy this link that's been generated into the Dask plugin that's on the far left side. And here I can choose things like the cluster memory or the task graph. Now I'm going to set the bucket credentials, and I'm going to generate some random data. And after the random data is generated, I'm then going to write the data to the AWS bucket. This is going to use the Dask cluster, and so the graph and memory sections are going to populate. So the tasks are now in the graph. You can see that a couple 100 megabytes are being used on the cluster, and we confirm that we've written the object to the bucket. I can then read the file back from the bucket. I can process the data, and I can even write again to the cluster. Again, you can see the tasks getting queued and waiting, and then they start running. And finally, I can trigger a last calculation.